and go there. Well, I'm trusting that that's going live. Then we go back here where we are live.
Wow.
Hello. Surprise. I never told anybody I was going to do this live podcast. Well, at least I didn't tell very many people. And I certainly didn't tell you. So here we are, conscious mind tripping with me, Audrey Newmont. And I have a very, very special guest today, Kai Hood, who is a podcaster himself. He's also, I usually keep things very anonymous, but today the secret is out. He has been a client of mine for a while.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It has been an honor.
No,
You
really.
have been, so I have all these people, right? And people either do the work or they don't. And sometimes when they don't, it's like, she didn't fix me. No, I didn't. And I don't. I don't fix anybody. I give people tools. I help them to understand who they are inside and out. And in that process, people fix themselves.
Yeah.
And they own new ways to communicate. They own new ways to do all the things that they do. So today you are going to get a dose of Mr. Hood here, and I'm promising you're going to find it interesting. And if you are a young man, or if you are a parent of a young man, or you're a girlfriend of a young man, or anybody who wants to get to know young men better and be a better young man yourself, this is the day. How old are you?
21.
Yep. And I want you, well, actually, first, before we go into everything, I'm not doing announcements today. You can go to newmontcenter.net and you can see all of our events that we've got going on. And I'm about to put a couple more out this weekend. And if you want to ask questions live, please go to Audrey Newmont on Facebook. And I have it here where I can see the questions come up and then we can answer. Okay? So
Wow,
there we
awesome.
go. There we are.
That is so cool. We're literally live. Look at that.
And he's liking it. And by the way,
that is so cool. Sorry.
Yeah, I want it on. Yeah. And by the way, Kai did a podcast with me a little while ago, and he just put it out today as well. So it's all about us in podcasting today.
No, it's fully public today, and that was a wonderful conversation just for people wanting to refound their mind, refound their subconscious, and just be very, very tactical with it and what steps you need to take and what that looks like. I mean, obviously you talk about that all the time, but we got super tactical and the specific steps you need to take to get to that point. And it was wonderful. And I've already sent it to a bunch of people, and it's all on all the platforms. So, and that was a lot of fun too. So,
it was.
Yeah.
You're always easy to talk to. We have a good conversation.
Well, thank you.
So I want to start by talking a little bit about you. You just recently talked on one of your podcasts about your transformation. So when we were first working together, he had some stuff going on like we all do. And in that process, I'm showing him the tools and showing him everything. And he recently did a podcast about that, but I want you to share today a little bit about that at the beginning so people have a sense of who you are.
Yeah, so I grew up in a wonderful environment where I got to watch my parents become more conscious in their process. And my family has actually been clients of the Newmonts for a number of years. So I got to grow up watching them own their conscious and grow in themselves, and then especially in their business and their careers. So I got to watch that, which was great. And in that process, I became a young man that was, I guess, what you could say more mature or more conscious or into self-development. But at the same time, I became a victim of what the crap is going on with young men today. And it was like this two-road, one is great, one is destructive. And I was living both lives. It was like, okay, I'd go to church and then I would, maybe study and get good grades, but then I would be, doing things I shouldn't be doing, eating extremely unhealthy, and pornography then became an issue. And then I had a lot of issues with girls in high school. So it was this like double road of, okay, I want to live an intentional life that impacts others. I want to have a great career, a family, whatever. But then I have all this other crap that I'm dealing with, and that a lot of other young men are currently dealing with. And thank God I met Audrey, because one day it just all hit the fan and I needed to make a change. And number one, it was God, and understanding that it's a process. And Audrey, you just gave me some absolutely wonderful guidance to own the new part of me and be on the one road, my intentional road, not the road that, the society wants us to be in, where you're not enough and you are lonely, and you have to be watching porn and you have to be doing what everybody else is doing, but that's not at all true.
Well, for a lot of kids your age, it's unfortunate. There is that issue of porn. There's alcohol and drugs and, this isolation. I see that a lot. And we've actually worked with quite a few people in that gaming isolation. So there's all these things that you guys are dealing with that we haven't had in society like we do at this very moment. So we want to address things. And one of the things I wanted to bring up with you, if you look at the podcast that he did, just the way you look when we first were working together as to how you look now is so different. And that's another part of it. So there's all those elements, and then there's also, and this is a really big thing that we didn't even talk about that we were going to bring up today, but it's huge. Our gut is the first thing. Our gut health is literally, if we're eating a lot of processed foods, if we're not doing the fuel that the body needs, the car analogy, it needs premium fuel, then it's going to be where you're in a brain fog and you're not thinking clearly. And then it makes it more easy to go into all these different avenues where we're not intentional on the road. So just that part alone about how you look, because I'm pretty sure that you have really changed certain things within your eating habits as well. That makes an enormous difference. So when we're talking about all the things that we wanted to bring up, we have a list. You know how much I like writing things down. Let's look at what do you think is like the main number one issue that people have, that guys your age are facing. If you were to put it all into, this would be up there in the top.
It's hard to put it into one because there's so much shit. But
well, then I'm going to address one of the first ones that we talked about.
Well, there is one I was going to say though.
Thanks.
Guidance. The number one thing is a lack of guidance, whether it be from mentors, God, education. There's absolutely a lack of guidance. And I was actually going to say accountability and having intention to be that, step into that masculine role of, hey, I want to help people and I want to make a difference. Or, you don't have to do those things. You don't have to do anything, but you're more likely to be happy when you are serving people and living an intentional life. And I think the biggest one is guidance, because without the guidance or the information or the education, there's no reason for accountability, because these young men have no idea where to go. Education isn't helping. They're not teaching how to have dreams and goals and live a happy, fulfilling life. And if anything, young men are being told, hey, don't be too selfish. Don't be too toxic masculinity, because then that's unhealthy and bad. Just stay in your little box. And it's a lot of education is saying that, unfortunately. I'm going to mention something that we had talked about before we came online today. And I think this is a very big deal. I sat with a bunch of guys. It must have been like, I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago. And no, it was around 12 years ago. And I'm sitting with all these guys and they were smoking pot. And I was talking with them about that. And I said, the interesting thing with pot or like peyote or something like that that's grown in the earth, this is what they're doing literally in front of me. And as they're smoking, I said, it used to be where like the wise men or the medicine men would
be smoking, and they would do it to get closer to God, to bring up that connection with their higher self. And I'm asking these guys, why do you smoke? And they said, they didn't want to be connected. They smoke because they've got anxiety, they've got all these strong feelings, and it's a way to numb, it's a way to get out of it, and it's a way to just be in that party mode that they were in. And then I was talking with them and I said, it's very interesting. Back when there used to be people and they'd be living on the land, you look at our forefathers before we got into all this technology that we got into, there was guidance. There would be the men of the village, the men of the town, and there would be this education on how to be a man, and these are the things that men do. And nowadays there is, where you're getting your education is like in a place like TikTok, and you're scrolling.
Yeah, you know what? I want to change my answer now that I think about it more. Leadership. There is a big, big lack of leadership right now. And I don't mean to speak that over our generation and young men, but the biggest thing is leadership from families, from fathers, from school, from anything. And the only leadership that young men have right now, if it's not in their own home, is the TikTok, is social media, podcasts, whatever. Better than nothing, but very, very mediocre. Very like minimal, less than bare minimum what a young man needs.
And it's not individual.
It's not at all direct or individual at all. I think my podcast is like the only podcast specifically for young adults, like young entrepreneurs.
Really?
Yeah, I've not seen another podcast that's specifically for young entrepreneurs.
I didn't even know that.
Or just young people on, deep self-development. It's all just very general and they kind of talk about it, but there's not enough leadership for the next generations, especially the young men. So
wow.
That's the number one for sure.
So when you're looking at that, that's why we're having this conversation. It used to be where people would be able to go to leadership within a community. And one thing that I'm really seeing a very serious challenge with is this idea of community. People have isolated. So when I'm working with and looking at guys in particular that are your age, a lot of the experiences that these guys are encountering is, like you say, a lack of leadership, but also what goes along with it is isolation.
Yes.
They're literally locking themselves in their rooms and they're playing on their games. And they are, unfortunately, when people, and this is important for everybody, when you are playing the games, you're in the game. It's an alternate reality, and reality is what we make it. Your perception creates your reality. And in those alternate realities, we're the hero. We're that person. We get to go in there and do all of those things that they're not out in life doing. So they're in hypnosis. And the more that they're allowed to isolate, the more that's what is created. And, I know of a situation in particular where unfortunately, years and years ago, I had told parents that they needed to address their young 13-year-old kid. And it didn't change. Long story short, this kid, from what I understand, is still isolating 10 years later.
Wow.
And it's not a way to live. So it's a bit of an addiction to break. But when you are able to, either as a parent or if you're the young adult and you're finding yourself isolating in the games, it requires literally taking that game and turning it off and finding resources like you.
That's literally, I literally went through that. I used to be totally game addicted.
Did you really?
Hours, yeah, I didn't even talk about it with you, no. Well, because I was already fixing it. Everything we've done. And you're absolutely right. That lack of community and isolation is why, number one, nobody wants to step up and be that leader because they're not going to get as much attention. And then number two is they're afraid to get out there and accept the leadership because they're having to be vulnerable. What's so intoxicating about the video games, and I lived it. Like, I was a gamer, like, nationally ranked, in there for sure.
Wow.
It was a lot, and thank God I'm like free from that for a long time. But what's
So tell
so
me the steps that you took.
yeah, so what's so intoxicating is that you can still hang out with your friends playing video games online,
I know.
and you can
That's
still
what I
talk to them.
get.
So it's absolutely that fake reality. But how I refounded that was I started finding joy in other things. And it almost got to the point where I'm like, I don't even want to play video games. Like, I have no desire to go turn on my Xbox. And although I miss some buddies online, I can just text them and say hello. I have no desire to go play video games. And I totally could if I wanted to. I totally could.
So what were the things that you went out and found joy with?
I went out and found joy in my own growth process, going to the gym, working on my businesses and the podcast. And I found joy in things that were healthy because taking an action that brings me to the better version of myself it started to begin to be a lot more joyful than distracting myself. And it's one thing to relax and, watch a movie or take some downtime, but through continuous repetition, being consistent, and number one, journaling and saying, well, my intention isn't to play video games 5 hours a day. I'm going to go through this moment of, okay, it kind of sucks because I really feel like playing, but the more consistent I am in doing that, I'm going to get to the point where I am now, where I have just as much happiness, if not more, doing things that are healthy, such as going outside, going to see a friend, seeing you, traveling, or anything outside of that that distancing and distracting reality.
So I want you all to think about this. If this is something that you're doing, or if you have somebody that you love that's isolating, it takes 21 days to change a habit. In that first week, it's no fun.
It's hard. It's like
just
that first week is like the really tough part where you really have to just push through. That's where that little inch of willpower is necessary, and from there on, you're golden.
Right.
Yeah.
So if this is you, or if it's somebody that you love, look at your community and look at anything that you can do. Anything, if you can just grab one of your friends and go outside and do something that would be fun in any way, shape, or form, take that first step. And then you're going to take another step and another step. Make a whole list of things. These are things that I can do. That would be not isolating. That would not be this alternate reality that is really on so many levels a waste of a life. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of a life. You gain very, very little from those things versus I can get out and find those things that bring me joy. That corner of your life that equals joy, the corner of your life that equals success and abundance, and the corner of your life that equals health. All the corners of your life, the game doesn't equal anything in those.
Yeah. It reminds me of a lot of the Matrix,
right?
Where you have these people they know they're in the Matrix and they know that they're in a false reality, but they like it because they don't want to face the real reality. And that can be really tough. And I lived that way for a really long time. But you said something really interesting on our podcast a while ago, is that these things, social media, phones, video games, all these devices, they make money by keeping us addicted.
Right.
It is designed to manipulate.
It's partly that they make money by keeping you addicted, but believe it or not, and this may be controversial, and I'm going to say it anyway, these people that own everything, there are certain little groups,
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say it.
On everything. They want people to be addicted to all these different things because we're easily manipulated that way. So the minute that we step out of the game, their game, the minute we step out of it and we become sentient, we become in control of our own lives, That's what sentient is. I think for myself. I
Yes.
make my choices. When you're in a game, you're not sentient. You're a part of their story and you are manipulated. So when you're able to step out of that and take that first step, it's like, I mean, just using your righteous anger alone to be like, are you kidding? Somebody's been manipulating me? Yeah, they have actually.
Yeah.
So step out.
I love it. And I wasn't sure if I was allowed to say it because that's the truth. I mean, it really is. And I was like, I want to say it, but this is her podcast. I don't know. But what's funny is that, well, it's not funny, but it ties into the young male or just, common male experience nowadays is they want you to be reliant on them. They want you to be reliant on the government, whatever you want to say, the social media, the dopamine, the video games, the porn. And unfortunately, it's in our food as well. And we have seen record lows in male testosterone in the history of the world.
Right.
Record lows. And I'm personally a victim of that as well. And it's absolutely destructive what's going on nowadays with the things that are normalized, such as the porn, the bad food, the video games. And it's not like, you touch a video game for 30 seconds, you're going to die. But it's a process of changing your habits and changing the sources of joy in your life. And changing that changed my life forever.
Right.
And you mentioned something earlier about the food, and I lost 30 pounds of fat in the past couple months.
I've noticed.
Pure fat. And thank you so much. You're so amazing. Give me a hug. You're so amazing. But I really do feel absolutely better spiritually, physically, mentally.
Yeah,
and
you're clearer in your mind.
Thank you. Yeah, and it feels amazing. And what the change was, less processed foods, less sugar, more whole foods. And this is more for bodybuilding, but I do keto during the week and then I carb load on weekends. So I'm away from the breads, the carbs, and that's very subjective. But that's personally what I did, and it's helped me to stay away from the packaged, colorful shit.
I want you to think about it this way. If you're ever confused on what to do with eating and you're making changes, we're energy beings. That's who we are. Each one of our cells is like an energy center, and each one of our cells needs energy. So think about it this way. When you're eating, is it firsthand touched by the sun? Eat it. Eat a lot of it. If it's secondhand touched by the sun, eat it. It's okay. But make sure it's organic. Make sure that you know where it's sourced from. And just that little rule of thumb is a big deal. If it's not been touched by the sun, probably not a good idea. And if you're doing that, just minimal amounts. You don't want to just, eliminate everything. But in particular, young adults, men and women, if you're having issues with acne and stuff like that, a lot of times it's about what you're ingesting. So when you are able to make those transitions, and again, 21 days makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So I want to go into another subject, and this is something that it could be, again, controversial. It's that porn thing. And I have worked with quite a few people with regard to porn, and it can be men and women. A lot of times it's more geared towards men. And I want to have you understand how that really impacts your life. And then I'm going to have you tell a little bit of your story. But I'm going to give an example, and this is a true story. And again, anonymous. I have this client who had a lot of issues with having a sustained relationship and even just bringing in a relationship. And this person, when they were a child, like 12, 11, somewhere in that kind of age range, found porn and started looking at it. And because that person was having such a challenge in their life at the time, it was a great escape.
Are you talking about me?
No, actually.
Oh. Okay, I'm listening. Sorry.
That's so funny.
It's so common.
In my mind, I'm picturing who it is.
Yeah.
It's a very common scenario. That's why I bring it up. And if, again, this has been your story, or if you're a parent and your child is starting to investigate this, you have to remember and this is why I have this, we take on the beliefs of who we are in our mind. This is the controller. So when you've got a very impressionable 11, 12, it starts even younger these days. It's really incredible. So when somebody is having an intimate moment looking at another person, whether it's through a magazine, whether it's on video or whatever, when they're starting to have their own feelings with that, and then they're having their own experience, it's not with somebody who's actually there. So, this person in particular, they could never have that partner because there's a part of it where it's always unattainable. If you're looking at Playboy and you're masturbating to that, you're never going to get that girl. So it makes the expectation of what equals this pleasure unattainable. So it's a belief that is then locked and loaded in the mind, and then the experiences are created from thereafter. So there is this disconnect. And then also all the other things that go along with it. And I don't need to go into all the details, but when you're learning a relationship, there is this, when you're doing a natural, heartfelt learning about being with in person a partnership, and you are learning about sex and sensuality and intimacy with another healthy relationship, there you are. But again, that whole thing about men and isolating, when you are learning something and there is not that actual partner there, and there's this imagination, then you're creating from that place. And again, on top of it, emotions are powerful, emotions are creative. So when you're doing that, guilt and shame are the rulers. There's a part of it where I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this, but I like doing it because it feels good and I don't have to be in my life and it feels good. And so then it just turns into this snowball down into hell.
Yeah, porn is absolutely destructive, especially to the male consciousness and that male identity because there's shame attached to it. And for me, who is a Christ follower, I believe in God, that sort of thing. That's usually how the enemy would want us to feel, is to feel shameful and to feel super guilty, and that we are to blame. And number one, this is a process, and that doesn't mean it's okay, but it's a process, and that there's grace there. But porn is the most destructive thing right now, I believe, mentally for young men. And what's really happening in the brain when they're viewing pornography, whether it be online in a video or in a magazine, is their dopamine, those dopamine levels in their brain are rising through the roofs like they would have had normal sex, if not more. And so what's happening is as soon as it finishes, whatever their process is, and they're not watching that porn anymore, their dopamine crashes. So not only do you feel shame, but your dopamine is like down below bedrock and it feels like shit.
Right.
And what happens is when you continuously are throwing your dopamine in for a loop, when you finally meet a girl and whatever happens, happens, it's never going to be the same as that joy and dopamine you got from watching the porn.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened to me. And then eventually I started to have relations with girls, but the problem was I would only see romance and love through the lens of sex.
Yep.
So it ruined romance for me. It ruined, any healthy relationship for me because I only saw that view and that through that lens of porn and sex. And I've been healed from that. And if you want to talk about that process, for sure. But porn is absolutely destructive. And when a young man really knows the information of what happens when they watch porn, it's one thing to hear, oh, well, it's bad, I shouldn't do it. But what you're really doing is killing your brain and you're killing your ability to truly love somebody.
That's one of the key parts to it. Because again, I've worked with a lot of people and I've worked with couples where that's more, again, it's more about the male. And it ruins the relationship for various amounts of reasons. Number one, regardless, the woman feels cheated on.
Yeah.
Then also the woman feels like they're not enough. And they can never be enough because there's never going to be that which equals what you get in the illusion of watching porn.
It's like in the Matrix. Again, it's a false reality. It's unattainable. It's photoshopped. It's fake. It's not. It's all not real.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not love making.
Yeah.
It's sex. And there is a difference. So when men learn sex and they don't attach love making with it, then there's your problem. And there is a solution. How did you fix that?
I went to Audrey Newmont, if you know who that is. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding.
She slapped you around a little bit and said, "You've got to stop that."
Well, it became it became, well, the reality of it was this, and I think it's important to share. And this is very vulnerable of me to share, but I will because it's absolutely necessary. And I have in front of crowds, audiences, and stages. But the porn issue for me used to be an everyday thing, and sometimes multiple times a day. And on top of that, I was having multiple sexual partners at the same time. And now I'm this like Christian, Christ following, like manly man. It's totally night and day. But that was
abstinent.
And abstinent, and that was absolutely the reality. And so it went from that being an issue every day to literally nothing as soon as I built a relationship with God. And there was a one specific day where, in the Christian community, you would call it coming to Christ. That day, I stopped watching porn from it being an everyday issue to never again for a number of months. And then it became a small issue here and there. But then again, I said a very, very powerful prayer to where I believed in the moment that I have been delivered from this. I am healed from this. And this is no longer a part of me. This isn't my intention. I know that watching porn is going to destruct my future, my family, my mindset, my own brain. And when I understood those things, said those prayers with belief, and got really consistent with the work and learned to flee from my phone in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Again, consistency with the work. It's never been a problem again.
Can I share something?
Yeah.
I was on the end of the phone in this process, and we were working remotely because he lives in another state. He's here now. That's why we're doing the podcast now. And I'm telling you, there were times, there were days, it was weeks where Audrey, I just feel so, I just really feel bad. You felt all these different feelings. And it's really important to get what I'm about to say because it's wildly important. A lot of times when people go into whatever the addiction, whether it's porn, alcohol, drugs, gaming, whatever those things are, it's a form of dissociation. You've had whatever trauma in your life, and I don't know how to be with the trauma. I don't know how to be with hard feelings. So I'm going to distract myself however I can. And when you distracted yourself so much that it was like you're just literally in another car, I don't want to be with those hard feelings. When you take the distraction out and you, instead of dissociate, you're associating and you're being present in your body, sometimes it's a hard ass moment.
It is really tough sometimes. Yeah.
It is. And when you're in that hard ass moment, this is the key. So when I say there's a key, this is where you land in your mind ahead of time. This too shall pass. And in these hard moments is where I find the kid in the back seat. It's where I connect with that stuff and I be the adult and I'm going to work through it. So being in those hard moments, it's not for the rest of your life. It's for a time, and it can be whatever amount of time. But the more you do the work, the more you recognize things, the more you're in process. And that's why you made it. He did the work. I was so just impressed with you because sometimes people don't. I mean, it's a choice. And when you are doing the work, it feels bad, but it's like there's a reason for the feeling bad. There's a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. And then as you get closer, the light gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're able to be who I'm sitting next to.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. It's like choose your heart. You can choose the heart of this moment of going through it and being present and facing, the issue, or you can choose the heart of having to deal with the aftermath of continuing with it. And then there's another thing where you could say, well, I'm going to go through this temporary pain for the permanent joy of being free from this. So it's like choose your heart and go through this temporary pain of that first week, 2 weeks of, getting rid of the video games, the drugs, the sex, the porn. And all those things were what I did. It was, I smoked weed, I had sex, I would watch porn, I played video games, I did all of it. And it was really tough. And I had to kind of get rid of, I naturally got rid of each one at a time. And it was really tough in that moment, but I knew that I was made for more. And I knew that God was going to work through me to do something special. And I would rather go through that temporary pain than not. And it's your choice.
How many months was it?
Was what?
That really hard time.
It was like about 4 or 5 months before I was like, okay, we're sailing. Yeah, it was like 4 or 5 months. Yeah.
So I want you to think about this. And this is for whoever's watching it, especially if you're a young man. Like I just had somebody here who's 35, and I was working with her, and I looked at her and I said, so you make those choices now, and you literally have another 50 years to live. 50 years. So when you're a young man and you're 19, 18, 20, 25, it doesn't matter what age. You have a whole lifetime ahead of you.
Yeah.
Like if you're 20, you have 4 more lifetimes.
Yeah. That's
Hello?
weird. Yeah, now that I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you take those 5 months and you realign yourself and you literally associate and you be with those hard feelings, when you're with the hard feelings and you're understanding them and you're in the process of doing that fear into power work, looking at your timeline, learning new ways to communicate, all those different things that we learn, then you're not going to have those again. They're done. They're out. So you've realigned yourself, or you've reestablished a new homeostasis, a new way to be.
Absolutely.
And that's why I do this podcast. That's why I talk about this stuff. It's important because so many kids right now are literally in that illusion.
Why don't we talk about the parents?
Okay,
You want to talk about the family and parents?
let's do it.
So that's really where the change needs to start for the young men. If you're my age, like 21, I mean, you're probably more on your own in that sort of sense. But a lot of these issues are from when you are in your childhood from 0 to 8, where the subconscious is formed, which you taught me. Phenomenal. I mean, it's truth, but phenomenal, lesson there, because now you can go back from ages 0 to 8 and see what was my environment like. What is actually causing me to want to distract myself and look at the porn and have sex or do drugs, whatever. And so we can look at those problems from the 0 to 8, like you say, and dig deep and do the what's it called? The detective work. Yeah, the detective work.
I was say investigative work.
Yeah, the investigative detective work and see what's going on there. But for the parents out there, I really would say you've got to be diligent and on your toes for seeing what your children are going through and what's available at their fingertips. And I'll give you an example. Right now, my little brother, he's about 10 years old. He doesn't play like a ton of different video games. He just kind of likes Fortnite. But there will be times where he plays a lot of Fortnite. And I'm like, when my parents included are like, hey, that's a little bit much. Let's slow that down. Let's stop that, because we don't want him to, grow up with these issues that a lot of the young men have today. And unfortunately, and I don't mean to speak this over anybody, it is a lack of healthy, conscious parenting. That's really the truth. And I could never blame my parents for the stuff I went through, but they simply just didn't know.
You know what? That's the other part of all of this. And this is important. Number one, it's not to judge anybody.
Ever, ever, ever.
You know, I've been a parent of 3 kids. I've got 2 grandkids. And am I perfect all the time? No, absolutely not. And you have to keep being aware of where you might be having a moment where you falter, where you have to realign yourself as a parent. So think about it this way. And for those of you who aren't parents, you may be parents one day. When you are driving your car and we have kids, they're in the back seat. So we're driving, and the kids in the back seat from 0 to 8 years old, they don't know the difference between this is good, bad, right, wrong, whatever. And the amount of people I've worked with over the years, especially children of alcoholics, it's again not to make anybody wrong or bad. It's just what happens. A lot of times, alcoholics are children of alcoholics or children of alcoholics, or we have an experience or something and it's creative. And alcoholics are just simply somebody who's taken an addictive car and they just do what they do. So again, it's not making it bad. It's making it where we start gaining an understanding of how we're creating as a parent. So when we are driving the car and they're in the back seat, it's not what we say, it's more what we do. They're just watching the behavior. So when you see your kids starting to do something, number one, pay attention and then look at what are they doing here and how did they learn it? And then you look at yourself with compassion, not with judgment. Is this
Yes.
something that they can be learning from me? Oh, all right, I need to realign my behavior. I need to make a shift. And it looks like that because I'm telling you, where I see parents getting into the most trouble is I don't know what to do with my kid. I don't know how to deal with it. And they put it on they're doing whatever and not recognizing their role in it because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be bad. Parents have a tendency to be defensive. So when you're able to step back and look at what the kid is doing, then comes the part as a parent, you look at how can I change for me and for my kid. And it's super important to look at it again. I can't even stress it. If I could say this like 20 times alone, just
Yes.
in this 5 minutes, compassion.
Yes.
Once you're judging it, you can't change it. But when you have compassion, like for instance, if a parent is super busy with work and then they get home and they're exhausted and they see their kid doing whatever, oh, I'm exhausted. I don't know what to do with it. I'm just going to go hole in my room while they hole in their room. There's everybody isolating. So you have to, as a parent, get, shit, I've got 21 days here. I've got to make a change. I can't go hole in my room anymore. I'm going to drag my kid out of that room. We're going to go get some dinner.
Mm.
And we're going to go do this or we're going to go do that. So you literally make that time to do whatever you can to change the homeostasis that has been created. Homeostasis is just what's normal. So there's little steps. Today I'll do this. The next day I'll do that. So you start creating those little moments where you start addressing you and addressing them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And there is no such thing as a perfect parent.
No.
No such thing as a perfect parent. And as somebody who's not a parent but was parented, and I like to share this perspective because it is very unique, it's very different, and I think it's necessary for today's society. And it's kind of like this. Well, when you go to a restaurant, who reviews the food?
The eaters.
The eaters, right? So nowadays it's a lot of parents teaching parents. I think there should be a little bit of a fine line where we're listening to some of the more mature people, maybe people my age, a little bit younger, a little bit older, that were parented just recently with the new parenting skills going on, the new parenting lessons in the new society and the new age, and share their perspective and their reviews of the food instead of just parents teaching other parents.
I like that.
And I think it's added a lot of value in my podcast because I've interviewed not only amazing parents, but amazing children of those parents. And it's been absolutely valuable, and there is no perfect parent.
What are the key things that you've seen that you can say, do this?
You said it earlier, and this is a big one. And I want you to meet this guy's name. His name is Tommy Dieter. And one of the things he says is he always keeps his promises to himself first and to the people he makes the promises to, because he wants his children, and we should all want our children to be people that are men or women of their word.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they do make a promise to themselves, for example, I'm not going to play video games for the next 2 weeks. You keep that promise, that's huge. And if you as a parent are keeping your own promises to yourself, especially to your children, whether it be about anything, whether it be about disciplining them, taking away the iPad, or whatever it is, you are now setting an example for them, and they will see what you do, not what you say.
Love that. Love that. Give me another one.
Another one, I think another great one is I think regular communication is important. So family meetings is a great one, where you can all be present, conscious together, weekly dinners, and that's very subjective to the family. But I think a really, really big one is, I just had it, I'm sorry. It was, excuse me, I'm so sorry.
While you're thinking about
Yeah.
that, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
One thing that I have seen, and I have worked with families, kids want time. They want to know that they're the most important thing. And if you could, kids would be like, you know what, put down the phone and just see me.
Ooh,
Be with me.
oof. Let me drop this on them. iPad kids come from iPhone parents.
Yep.
Ooh, oof. A lot of parents scroll too.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of parents scroll too.
It's a very big deal.
Oh yeah, iPad kids come from iPhone parents.
Well, they're in the back seat.
Yeah, they're just watching what they do.
Yeah, this is what we do. This is where our attention is. This is the distraction. So when we're talking about addictions, there's all these different addictions. Scrolling is a major addiction right now. So I want you to think about it. We bring these little children in and they're like, oh, these babies, and we want them to have like this whole great experience of life. I want you to think about, do you want your kid to be in a phone, or do you want your kid to be experiencing all that life has to offer? All right. So when you're in your phone and you're scrolling and your kid's over there and they're watching TV or they're doing whatever, everybody's in their alternate realities. So I can't stress enough. I think it's such a big deal. Bring them into your reality, if nothing else. And everybody watches TV together or something where you're talking about whatever it is that you're watching and making it where we're in person, or go outside and do something. Go change it up. But when you are scrolling and the little kid's pulling on you, that's when it's time to put the phone down. And if it's a hard thing to put down, there's maybe where the work needs to be done. It's a big deal.
I think that's huge, practicing being present.
Yes.
Very big deal, because then if you're not being present enough with them or giving them that time of day, like you said, they grow up to be the young men and women that we just talked about that are utilizing the video games and the distractions and the porn and the whatever. And this is no judgment. Number one, compassion. But part of the reason I needed to distract myself was because my parents were very, very, very busy when I was growing up. And it was like dad was working almost 24/7. Mom had her own stuff going on. And I was mainly around mom, but they were constantly doing stuff. They were constantly on the phone calls, on work stuff, traveling, whatever. And again, it's no judgment or compassion, but unfortunately that led me to deriving joy and a sense of love and affection from things like porn, things like video games, and things like, approval addiction from other people. And So that really does shape, it really does shape the next generations. And I think this is so important because number one, it's your own kid, but number two, in 10 to 15 years, it's not you who's going to be leading people like me. It's going to be me right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be the next generations, our next leaders in society, our next leaders in business and in politics, whatever, in school especially, are going to, in 10, 15 years, are going to be the people right now.
Right.
The people that are my age and a little bit younger.
That's why I majorly appreciate you've done so much of the work, and he's created this Refounders podcast. And I want to say, and this is super important because one thing that I have seen, and this is not something that we talked about in our little list of things, but I think it's wildly important. And I can speak from my own experience. When he's talking about God and that God is leading the way for him and his connection to God, that's the first driver. And there's a huge part of our population. It's not even about kids. It's not about, it's a huge part of our population where it's either, I don't believe that, I don't know about that, or how I used to be. I used to be like, God, just don't even. I mean, I would read a book that had the word God in it, slam that thing shut, because the way that I was raised in my Southern Baptist background, I understood for myself certain things that just didn't make sense, and I wanted nothing to do with any of it. God had, in my opinion, forsaken me, and it's like I'm not even. And it took me a while, and thank God I understand now God, and it is my first driver. It is that source that leads me, that guides me. And on a regular, daily, a lot of the time during the day, I am connected with and trusting and having that faith and literally leading a very good life with God as the first driver. So when it's about, you're speaking about God, there is a part of it where, unfortunately, if you,
there's a bad picture about it nowadays.
that's my point.
And so what there's, and unfortunately in the Christian community, in churches they're talking about it, but the problem is that if we're going to spread a positive message, it needs to happen outside of the church. And what's happening outside of the church and on social media is a lot like, oh, well, hey, you're sinning and you're being a bad person and blah, blah, blah. Well, the truth is that number one, there's grace. And number two, this isn't some sort of box rules you have to follow to have a relationship with God. It's a relationship. It is pure love. And everybody has their own relationship with God. It's not my relationship. It's not Audrey's relationship. It's your relationship with God. And it's about love. And if you read the Bible and any of the books in the Bible, even the books that were taken out of the Bible, it is all based on love. It is all based on success, abundance, and fulfillment in life. And a lot of people are afraid of this whole God thing and this phenomenon because, number one, some of it is actually accountability, I think. Some people don't want to be held accountable for their actions. But number two, it's that false sense of like, oh, well, as soon as I start following God, I can't have fun anymore. And I can't live this fun life or be fulfilled. And I have to follow these things and go to church every Sunday. And that's not at all how it is.
Well, if guilt and shame equals fun.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
but what's funny is in the Christian community, that's actually how the devil wants you to feel. So you don't have a relationship with God.
So that's the thing that's a fine line. I have nothing on anything. I don't care if you're Christian. I don't care if you're Mormon. I don't care if you're Muslim. I have nothing on any of it.
Yeah.
But if anything that you are going with has a lot of attention, second button, attention on being a sinner, or don't do this or don't do that, or all of that stuff, you have to remember the brain thinks in pictures. The brain thinks in pictures. So when you're hearing don't do, your brain's going to be picturing that. And there's this disconnect. There's this like unconscious little messaging that's going on. Rule of thumb: there is no wrong or right. There is no sinning. There's just what we do with the consciousness that we do. So if you're doing something that doesn't feel good, that's not bringing you that natural joy, that natural peace, that natural appreciation, that natural, all of those things that we innately are, if there's something that's creating a disconnected, a bit of separation from it, stop it. Literally, stop doing it and understand there is so much that brings this huge amount of joy that we can do that's not associated with wanting to disconnect. The more that you are connected, the more that you're connected with you instead of dissociated, connected with you and connected with your higher self. There you are. So take out the religious part of it, take out all of that
it is
stuff.
not religion, it's relationship.
Yes.
It is not religion, it is absolutely relationship. And if there is any focus and attention on the shame and guilt, that's not relationship, that's religion.
Yep.
And that's where and I am so sure that you have clients that have religious trauma where they were forced going to church and
I had my own.
Did you? Yeah.
I had my own.
Yeah.
I'm the one that put myself in it.
Yeah.
I was in second grade and the teacher asked the class how many of us went to church. And because I was not parented very much, I was like one out of two that raised our hands, and I went, oh my God, I think we're supposed to be going to church. Everybody else is.
Yeah.
So I went home and I told my brother, hey, we need to be going to church. I dragged him up to the first only church that I knew. It was literally on the grounds of the school, and it was Southern Baptist. And in the process of being there for years, it was like I kept noticing a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't need to go into it. And it was like finally I was like, well, I'm just no, I don't want anything to do with God. This is ridiculous. Until I understood. And now the first driver, God, is my source for everything. And it makes life grand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And the churches will always fall short. People always fall short. And God talks about it all the time. And it's funny, in the New Testament of the Bible, Paul wrote most of the New Testament in the Bible. And what he used to do was send letters to false or just general churches that are doing really bad things. And that was actually some of the books in the Bible. And it was supposed to, quote unquote, correct their churches at the time. But the funny thing is that we're all wrong and we're all hypocrites and we all don't truly know everything to the T. And it's funny, there are some churches that are like, oh, well, don't follow that thing because they're wrong. But then the other church is telling us that we're wrong and that they're wrong. And it's this like freaking blame game, when in reality, this is about a relationship. This isn't about a religion. And it doesn't matter who's wrong, who's right, because nobody's wrong or right. It's just what is. And if we die and there's some other reality, or it was all just a bad dream, we don't know, then that is what it is. But there is no judgment. There should not be shame and guilt in your process with your relationship with the universe and God, whatever. And these churches, sometimes some do a great, some do a interesting, not so great job, but it's not centered. If it's centered around judgment, then that's not true. That's not true.
Rule of thumb: if it doesn't feel good, if there is guilt or shame or remorse or judgment, or there's things that were you going, oh my gosh, I'm a bad person, then maybe you need to look a little more intently at it and realign yourself with it.
Yeah.
However that looks.
Great churches will always make you feel the most welcome. And the funniest thing is, most people that follow God or have a relationship with God, we're the most broken people. And we're the most, quote, sinful people. Hey. Yeah, like, and that's exactly what it's. We all have issues. We all are in our process. So there is no judgment. We're all guilty, but we're not going to feel and sit in that.
And until you don't. And then you be in a moment of grace for an extended period of time, then something comes up and it's like, oh, And then you have to realign yourself again. You fall short. You have the faulty thinking. You have whatever going on. And even in that, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing bad about it. You realign. Life is a continual realigning with
Yes.
your highest self. And when I say your highest self, and then we're going to have to end because I think we're running over time. I have no
Yeah.
idea what time we even started.
Yeah. I didn't even know either. Yeah.
What I'm saying here is when we're talking about our higher self, and when I'm talking about the first driver, we're energetic beings. That's who we are. Each one of our cells is like its own little universe. Our heart literally talks to this universe with our quantum brain. So when you are realigning, there's a part of it, it's like, oh, something has gone on here. I got to get with my higher self because this little bit of energy flows through your human body. Most of you is here. So your higher self is here. There's a part of you that already knows every magnificent choice you can ever make. So when you are connected with that and you're trusting that and you're having faith, I don't care what you call it, it's absolutely there. You've seen it in action in your own life, creating some very serious miracles. We could talk about on
Yeah.
another podcast. But when you are aligning, realigning with that part of you, you're allowing that to give you those messages, to give you that inspiration, to give you that guidance to know where to go, what path to choose, what path not to choose.
Yeah. And I think that relationship, and I see you're tearing up. I love it. That relationship with God, the universe, like you said, whatever, the person calls it, that when you allow that higher self and that divine right action being of God to guide your goals, your intentions, whatever you think you're called to do, and those goals and dreams and that vision for your future becomes clear, it becomes a lot easier to navigate those distractions because now you have a reason for it.
Yep.
Instead of saying, oh well, I don't want to do this because it's bad, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this because it's bad, and I have all these other things I want to go do. I have all these other great things in my life, and I have this big future that I want to live. So now there's more motivation there, and there's something to drive you to get away from those distractions and that destructive behavior. Like it wasn't the fact that porn was unhealthy that brought me away from it. It was that I knew I was capable of a great loving future, and porn was stopping me from getting there.
Yep. There's one little adjustment that I would make.
Yeah, what do you think?
Let's not say I don't want to do it because it's bad.
Hmm.
Take out, this is such a big deal. And Nietzsche said it so good. There is no right or wrong, there is no bad. There's just simply, is it working?
Yeah.
Are you having the things that bring you the greatest joy, the greatest health, the greatest love, the greatest success and abundance? If there's something, I'm hitting this
No,
thing.
you're good.
If there's something that is in your day-to-day life that's not bringing you the greatest and highest, that best, you wake up and it's like, I'm on, then stop doing it.
That's a much better way to put it. If it's serving you or not.
Yeah.
If it's serving your goals and your highest self. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
gonna,
Yeah.
there's this little skit that we watched recently, and this is where we're going to end things because I just keep thinking about this skit. It's this guy, he's playing the therapist. I forget his name at the moment. He's playing a therapist, and he has a client that comes in, and he says, guaranteed 5 minutes, you pay me $5, I'm going to fix what you've got going on. $5, 5 minutes, okay. So she tells him, she goes, I'll do it. And she gives him the money, and he says, go. And she says, well, I have this big terror of being locked in a box alive, buried alive in a box. And he goes, oh, all right. Well, I think about it all the time. He goes, all right. Well, does it affect your life? Well, sometimes, like if I have to go into an elevator or something like that, it can affect my life. And he goes, all right. So aside from that, have you ever been buried alive in a box? Well, no, but it's something that I think about and it scares me. And so he's like, all right, well, I'm going to fix that for you. And I'm going to give you 2 words. She's like, should I write them down? No, you don't have to write it down. I'm just going to give you these 2 words. And they are, stop it. And she's like, stop it? Yes, stop it. Stop thinking about being buried alive in a box. And she's like, that's it? Just stop thinking about that? Yeah, stop it. And so she's like, okay, all right, I'll just stop it. And then she's like, well, there's still 3 minutes. Can I have my $3 back? He's like, no, it's non-refundable. But do you have any other problems? Well, I've got this thing. And then she's like going on about some other problems that she's got going on. And all of it is about what she's thinking,
Yeah.
which creates what we're doing. And so he looks at her and he goes, all right.
Stop it.
Stop it. And the reason I never posted it, because in this particular skit, he's like, all right, I'm going to give you 5 words now, or whatever the amount of words were. And she's like, well, should I write them down? And he's like, well, you can if you want to. She goes, all right, go ahead. He goes, stop it, or I'll bury you alive in a box.
Oh, that's so
The therapist would never say that. But seriously, the amount of times that it's like, whatever you're doing, we get so caught up in I'm doing this, I'm thinking this. It's like,
yeah,
you have the ability to stop it. So if that's what you need to say to yourself, it's like, all right, just stop it.
Yep. Absolutely. Right? Yep.
Doesn't it make sense?
Yeah, that was something you taught me, that I am capable enough of changing and stopping it and stopping the things causing the issues. And as soon as I was told that I was capable of doing it and actually tried, it worked.
Right.
Well, would you look at that?
So it's like, stop it. And then more importantly, start it. What are you starting? What are you doing? Do that. It's just like that, right? It's ridiculously simple, and yet it's a process.
Yeah, it's a process. There's grace. There's so much grace and compassion and love in the process. And there were times I even failed. Yeah. And it's not about how many times you fail, it's how many times you get back up.
And slap back.
Yeah, and it's like that, we won't get into this, but the rubber band analogy, it's about how hard you get back up. Because there are times when you'll fail the diet, you'll fail, in whatever process you're in. But it's good to get back up as soon as you can and get back onto the process and try your best to keep going, because sometimes it happens. Right? There's grace, compassion, and love. Just bounce back as hard as you can.
Yep.
So,
and in that moment of failing, I need to come up with an acronym for fail.
Yeah.
There is never a fail,
because that was
unless you just completely stop.
Yeah.
Then maybe you fail.
Failure is quitting. I believe you don't fail if you fall. I think falling is different than failing, because sometimes we fall on our path, but failing is, leaving the path and quitting.
Yeah.
That's a way to put it.
My biggest idea of failing is somebody who can't break that addiction and they die. That's failing.
Yeah.
You just don't have an out for there. You just have failed. And believe it or not, even in the dying, you get to choose again. You get to make it happen at some point. Always. Because we're eternal beings.
We are absolutely.
That could be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But how do people get a hold of you? How do they watch your podcast? And if they want to have some time with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for asking. I appreciate that. And it's been an honor being on the show. And this was wonderful. And learning your process and you helping me change my life has been amazing. Oh, my goodness. Well, if you want to connect with me, if you just look up my name, Kai Hood, on all platforms, you'll see me and my brand and some of my businesses. You'll see Refounders, our company and community that's aimed at refounding the next generations. So we actually provide the mentorship, the education, the community, the leadership, and lessons for young adults that school is not teaching them, and some parents might not be able to teach them as well.
Right.
So we are providing all of that through our Refounders movement and community, which I know you will be somehow involved in. But if you look up, but if you look up the Refounders show, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube, the podcast is there too. So, and your episode just came out today. It was awesome.
So watch our episode on that.
Yeah.
And I will be back on live on Wednesday night. So I'll look forward to seeing you all then. We will definitely be having him back here again soon.
Oh, yay.
And thank you very much.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
Love you all very much. Go do those things that you can do to realign yourselves. And I will catch up with you soon. Bye for now.